Oregon fans, what's going on? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. It is a busy week for Duck football as Oregon is getting ready to face off against the number 25 Washington Huskies. And today we have our Oregon versus Washington preview podcast here on the Ducks Dish podcast. And joining me to break it down is Dan Raley. He is the publisher of Inside the Huskies. I believe that's the new name that you guys have over there. He's on the Fan Nation Network with me, and glad to have you here, Dan. How you doing?
Hi, Max. I'm doing good. Always fired up to see the Washington, Oregon football teams play. So, yeah, this is the highlight of the season, the number one game on Washington's schedule.
Yeah, it is. It's got all the makings of a good rivalry, a rivalry I know that you're very well acquainted with. So I'm excited to have you on and dive a little bit deeper into, this game, what it means for both teams, where the Huskies are at under Kalen DeBoer taking over in Seattle. But before we get into the nitty gritty in today's show, quick favor to ask of you guys, if you're here in the live show, go ahead and leave a comment, leave a question in the live chat. We'll see if we can get to it. Always fun to see where you guys are at. Like the video, leave us a comment on your thoughts about this game, and subscribe to my channel on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres. All that support is greatly appreciated. So starting things off, Dan, we haven't talked, I don't think, in a while, really since Kalen DeBoer was hired. And there was a lot of stuff going on after the Oregon-Washington game last year with Jimmy Lake getting fired. So I think a good place to start things off is just asking you, what's the mood of the fan base in Seattle right now under Kalen DeBoer, 6-2 heading into this game, I believe, and it's looking pretty solid.
Yeah, well, last year the fan base was shocked. I mean, the program got run into the ground, and it basically happened in this game. They were a break-even season, which was disappointing. Yet here Jimmy Lake kind of mouthed off before the game. Then he shoved a player. Then he got fired. Then the team finished with 4 straight losses to end the season, and the thing was just in shambles. So Husky fans were kind of numb by it all. So here comes Kalen DeBoer, who I wasn't sure if he would fit really well because he's very conservative, very low key, but he was perfect for what all these football players wanted up here, is a little stability. So he's come in and it's considered a success what he's done so far. Even if he gets beat by Oregon by 3 or 4 touchdowns this weekend, what he's done is he's put the thing back on its feet. And so people are really enthused by that. They're going to go to a bowl game. They haven't been to a bowl game since 2019. So that's three years of nothing. So I'd say everybody's pretty enthused. And if he could somehow beat Oregon, it would really rubber stamp his program, but it's not mandatory.
Okay, yeah, that's a good little summary of where things are at, and I double checked, it's 7-2 on the year, so gotta correct myself there. I think one thing that's really interesting as just a kind of a broad storyline for this team, I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more, but maybe you can talk a little bit about just what the culture has kind of been like, or maybe you've seen a culture shift, seeing that Washington's been known for a team that really stamps its identity on the defensive side of the ball. But Kalen DeBoer comes in. This offense is putting up a lot of points. You have an explosive passing attack with Michael Penix. What's that kind of culture shift been like since they've been a team that's been so prided on their defense?
Well, I think people would rather see points if they have to sacrifice, and see a lot of points on the other side too. It's been really kind of entertaining for everyone involved because no one's been able to stop this Washington football team in nine games. They only scored 24 against Oregon State, but they still won. So the trade-off is, we'll take offense over defense. It was like the Sonny Six Killer era 50 years ago when Dan Fouts was at Oregon and Sonny Six Killer, an Oregon guy, was at Washington, and they just put up points right and left, and wasn't a lot of defense back then either. So this is kind of a step in the past towards something like that, and it's led to success. I mean, sure, they lost a couple games along the way, but people will take what they have right now, and they love offense.
Yeah, it's always an entertaining game when you can see some offensive fireworks, and they've got quite an impressive group there from Penix to the wide receivers. The offensive line has been playing pretty well with Jackson Kirkland, Roger Rosengarten, and to name a few. But just to kind of flip this on its head a little bit, I want to just kind of talk about where Oregon's at, and then I want to get a good story from you because I know you mentioned that before we went live here. But to measure the fan base in Eugene right now and where things are at with the Ducks, I think that Oregon fans are feeling as confident as ever. I've said it a couple times, but I don't think that you could ask for a better start to the Dan Lanning era in Eugene, especially in his debut as a head coach. He's doing really well, rattling off 8 straight wins since that opening loss to Georgia, which was pretty embarrassing. I definitely expected Oregon to be at least competitive in that game. Didn't expect them to win that game. But this is the real deal. I think that there was a lot of pent up emotion in last year's Huskies rivalry game, seeing that the teams didn't get to play each other in 2020 because of COVID-19 complications. So that was a wild game last year in Seattle. I was at that game. It was a cold, rainy game. There was all the stuff that happened in the locker room with Mario Cristobal talking about everything wrong with college football and some moments I'm sure he rather wouldn't have had recorded. But now Oregon's starting this back end stretch on the season with a really tough Washington, Utah, Oregon State run. But their sights are set on that Pac-12 title game and maybe even a little bit farther than that.
Well, the thing I like about the Ducks is they have both sides of the football playing well. The Huskies have one side. And so they have a quarterback, a new quarterback, just like Washington does, that has kind of changed everything around on offense and made everybody confident and made it all real consistent. So, the Ducks have been impressive. I was stunned that they lost so badly in the first game, but, that stuff happens. Washington played Alabama in the college football playoff, and it wasn't real pretty. And, that was a good Washington football team. And this is a good Oregon team. So, you can't listen to anybody that says, that thing scars them forever. I'd say Georgia want to play them now. We'll see what would happen if that takes place.
Yeah, because I know that Bo Nix in a recent interview a couple weeks ago, I think it was with Dennis Dodd, he said that he feels like if the two teams played again, that they would come out on top against Georgia. And I think you want to hear that from your quarterback, from your leader. You want to have him exuding confidence and feeling good about the product that they can put out on the field and the growth that they've made, that they've had over the season. But Dan, I know you're very well acquainted with this Oregon-Washington rivalry. In fact, I think you were saying you're writing a book on the rivalry, and you had kind of a good story about this Oregon-UW rivalry. Maybe now's a good time to ask you that.
Yeah, we're doing this book, and I'm doing it with an Oregon grad named Monty Enbesk, who will be at the game on Saturday. And, one indicator, I consider this one of the top 5 emotional rivalries in the country, right up there with Oklahoma, Texas, Georgia, Florida, Ohio State, and Michigan, and then probably USC and Notre Dame. But, as far as going across state, not inside a state, but I consider it one of the top 5. And, one of the examples is, Oregon beat Washington 58-0. In 1973, and the very next year, 12 months later, Washington won 66-0. You've never seen a turnaround like that amongst two great football teams ever. 124-point swing in 1 year. It's pretty amazing. But the story I have is it just shows you how the Ducks and the Husky fans have always messed with each other. And this one goes way back to 1951, and the teams played in Portland. And Hugh McElhenney, who's behind me to my left in the frame here, he was the Washington standout on an All-American running back. And so the two teams played in Oregon in 1951 in Portland. And two brother-in-laws, one lives in Oregon, one lives in Washington, going to watch the game together. And they're such rabid fans. They're always on each other about who is better, just like now. And they just dogged each other all week about who's going to win. And then they sat together at the game and they dogged each other throughout the game. But the game got really out of hand in Washington's favor, and Washington won 63-6. So the brother-in-law that lives in Oregon had a farm up in the Dalles. And so they went back up there after the game, 100 miles up the road, 120 miles, whatever it is. And they had dinner, and the brother-in-law from Washington said nothing. And then he said nothing on the drive all the way out to the Dalles. And all through the night, he said nothing. And this was totally atypical of this guy. I mean, he usually would just grind it into the, his brother-in-law and just let him have it and gloat and, just like a typical fan would that won. Well, so everybody goes to sleep, and the next morning they wake up, and this is a huge farm, 1,000 acres, whatever, big giant red barn right in the middle of it all. And overnight, somehow, the Washington brother-in-law got out in the barn, found a can of white paint, and as big as he could with a ladder, wrote 63-6 on this guy's red barn up in the Dells. So this is your mindset between Husky and Duck fans, because they do it to each other. I mean, the Duck fans have thrown dog biscuits at the Huskies down in Eugene, and the Huskies have put little yellow ducks in the urinals at Husky Stadium, every single one.
I saw that last year when I went.
Yeah. So it's just that's what makes this thing so fun. If it doesn't turn violent, in the stands or something, it's fun, and it's emotional, and people care. So,
yeah, that was a great story. I think it sums up some of the maybe not all of it, but some of the pettiness between these two fan bases. You talked about top 5 emotional rivalries in the country. These are two fan bases that just absolutely hate each other. I feel like anytime something's going poorly for Washington, I see it on my timeline for Twitter because Oregon fans just love it. And then anytime Oregon's doing poorly, that's when I'll see, if I write a decommitment story or if some Oregon player isn't doing well, I'll see some Washington fans in my mentions, kind of just trying to poke fun at the Ducks. So it's a rivalry that it goes year round, but it's really going to hit its peak this weekend when the two teams face off in Eugene.
Yeah, and the thing that's probably hard a little bit is the Oregon fans and the Ducks could dislike Jimmy Lake last year. Kalen DeBoer's hard to hate. he's really respectful and just very professional and businesslike, and talked highly of Bo Nix this week and Lanning, and so he's just not going to put anything out there that's going to make you hate him, even though he's going to be wearing purple. So.
Yeah, I've been really fascinated by Kalen DeBoer and just how quickly he's turned the team around. And there's a lot of pieces that have helped make that happen. Reuniting with Michael Penix. I definitely want to talk more about that here in just a second. And just I don't know. It's been interesting to learn more about the Washington program, especially after I got to go out to my first game at Husky Stadium last year. That was, Oregon fans can say what they want, but that is a beautiful setting. I mean, you definitely have a treat being able to cover games at that stadium out there on Montlake, the greatest setting as they call it. But Autzon's pretty unique. I take it that you've been to Autzon a couple times before.
Oh, several times. Sure. I'm an old guy. I've been doing this a long time. So yeah, I've been to Eugene a lot, and I like Eugene. I even wanted to go to college there at one time, but I went and played small college football in Washington. But Oregon was probably my second choice because I knew I couldn't play what was then Pac-8 football. So,
sure, okay, yeah. Right on.
Well, you mentioned the turnaround a little bit. One of the things that DeBoer did, he came in and found out this team was in not very good shape at all, and so out of the 100 guys on the roster, I think he made 65 of them lose weight, and he changed people around in positions. He took a guy like Ulamu Ale, who's 6'7" and he was 370 pounds. He's about 40 pounds lighter, and he plays defense instead of offense. And so he shuffled guys around, and he took out last year's starting quarterback and sat him down and is retraining him and running the football team. But there's Jackson Kirkland was a two-time all Pac-12 offensive tackle. He plays offensive guard now because they like this Troy Fautano is their left tackle now, and he's kind of a star for the future. And Jacqueline Kirkland's still pretty good and going to be an NFL player, but he plays guard now. So DeBoer has come in and he does his own thing, and it's kind of unique to see it.
Yeah, that's some fascinating insight there about losing weight. A lot of times that's kind of what sometimes coaches come in, and that's one of the ways they can leave their mark and make their impact immediately. Because of the timing of the coaching carousel. You get your staff in there. We know how important the strength and conditioning staff is. Those guys spend a ton of time with the players, sometimes even more time than the head coaches because of the off-season training programs and everything that goes into that. One more thing I wanted to talk about real quick that I think is a fascinating component of this rivalry before we get into the Washington offense, Dan. Oregon has recruited the state of Washington at a really high clip. Just in general, I think that's been kind of their hotbed in terms of the Pacific Northwest. We know that Oregon as a state doesn't produce a ton of top end talent like the Californias, like the Texases and Floridas and other big states out west. But Washington's a state that's been very, very kind to Oregon on the recruiting trail. Obviously, the big story this year is Josh Connerly Jr. out of Rainier Beach. That one was an Oregon versus USC battle down the stretch, but Washington was in the picture there a little bit, and he got his first touchdown last week against Colorado on his birthday, so that was a cool little dimension. But and then staying at Rainier Beach, you have Caleb Presley in this 2023 class, one of the top corners in the country, top guy in the state of Washington after Jaden Wayne transferred to IMG. So I think that's another little fascinating layer, seeing that Oregon and Washington do go toe-to-toe on the recruiting trail quite a bit. And at least recently, Oregon's come out on top more often than not.
Well, I don't think anybody feels obligated to recruit the local guys. It makes the alums feel good. But, DeBoer has a 19-player recruiting class coming in. There's only 2 Washington guys on that list. So Washington ebbs and flows with its talent levels too. But definitely – the better players have left town, and the downturn was part of it. Washington wasn't sexy enough for these guys to come play. NIL has, made an impact. Some people are offering more money, and they're able to do that. And I think Washington's very conservative as far as the money outlay. But Oregon is also kind of meets today's football players' needs. I mean, you go in there and it's exciting. The whole facility is brand new and it's new age. I call it the Disneyland of college football. Everybody wants to go there and get on the rides. And so why not? I don't blame Josh Connerly or Presley for not wanting to be a hometown guy. They want to go where it's fun, and they want to go where maybe they think they have their best opportunity to be NFL football players. And, who knows how long they'll be in Eugene for that matter. College football has definitely changed, but, DeBoer needs to keep just the fans happy. He needs to, keep a couple of these guys home. The Jaden Wayne thing would kind of hurt, and you wonder if he's, real excited about his commitment now, because Miami's going to take a while before they rebuild it. So it's not like it's all set like Oregon or Georgia or somebody like that. So, yeah, it's just they're hard decisions, but that's the way college football is today. It's very transient. There aren't too many borders to it, especially for recruiting. And Alabama doesn't feel they have to get all of Alabama kids to stay home because they're going to recruit the country, and so are the Ducks. The Huskies are just kind of starting to do that for the first time.
So. Yeah, and I could talk recruiting all day, Dan. It's just I love sinking my teeth into that. But that is one of the areas that I think Kalen DeBoer has quickly turned this Washington program around, was the momentum that he got on the recruiting trail pretty much right when he got hired. I think that's definitely been a plus for them. They're not really known as a recruiting powerhouse, but there's not a head coach out there that will tell you that it's not important to recruit. Sorry, I got some gardeners outside my window, so I'll try to minimize how much you guys can hear that.
I can't hear it at all. Don't worry about it.
Okay, that's good because I can hear it. But yeah, so the recruiting is so important, and I'll have another podcast out talking about some of the visitors for this weekend. But just wanted to bring that up and hit on that a little bit. Maybe we do see Jaden Wayne as a guy who Oregon can circle back on, because I know that they liked him before he ended up committing to Miami. So, Dan, let's go ahead and take a closer look at this Washington roster and kind of how they've been performing this year in various aspects. Let's start with the offense. I know the story is Michael Penix, but they have a lot of talented receivers with Rome Odunze and Jalen McMillan, to name a few. So maybe it makes sense to just start with Michael Penix and kind of what you've seen from him this year and what you think has been allowed him to be so successful in this transfer to Washington.
Well, he's just a great football player. I mean, he's going to be an NFL player next year. He's tall. He's 6'3". He stands in the pocket. He's as poised as anybody you're going to see, and he has a real strong arm. So I knew, when spring football started, they said it was a 3-player competition. After one day, I said, what 3-player competition? There's only one guy out there that's worthy of this job, and it was Penix. He's just heads and tails over what they've had in a while. And they haven't had a real great quarterback at Washington for a long time. Like probably since Jake Locker was a #1 draft pick, and he didn't. He wasn't. He was worthy enough to be an NFL #1 draft pick, but he wasn't, say the All Pac-12 quarterback. So Washington, Jake Browning was good, but just efficient, and then Jacob Eason is kind of a bust in a way. I mean, if they hadn't given him the job, Jake Haener would have finished out his career at Washington and maybe developed into the quarterback that they needed along all these lines. But here's Penix. The job is his. He stayed healthy. He never played more than 6 games at Indiana, but he's now going into his 10th game here down at Eugene. So that's a major victory for him because he's just had so much bad luck in his career with getting injured 4 years in a row and not being able to finish any of those seasons. I knew he was good looking at his stats, meaning he was second team all Big Ten in 2020, 2 years ago. So, I mean, look at that conference. I think he was only behind Justin Fields at Ohio State as far as recognition. And he goes into Ohio State and he throws for 497 yards and 5 touchdowns, something like that. And goes into Michigan and beats Michigan State, Michigan, and Penn State. And, this is Indiana. Indiana had been like, who's a bad example of, one of our worst teams in the Pac-12. That was Indiana in the Big 12.
Colorado.
Yeah, in the Big Ten. Colorado, yeah, they were inefficient, but he comes in and he took them to a bowl game and he took them to a winning season, at least as long as he played. And DeBoer coached with him there. He was his offensive coordinator in 2019. So that's where they made a connection. But no, Penix is somebody to be afraid of. And, he'll make a mistake. He threw a pick 6 at against Oregon State. He threw one at Arizona State. But he's enough to keep you feeling uneasy, and they felt that way all throughout the Big Ten. So, he's the starting point of this offense, and it all revolves around him. And he came in and he found one of the things that attracted him here to Washington was the 3 wide receivers, that are really good. We're talking Odunze, McMillan, and Polk. And then he had 4 guys out of the 5 offensive linemen coming back. What's funny about that is they moved 2 of them out of there. One guy doesn't play and one guy plays on defense. So they've rebuilt that offensive line, and it does what the Oregon offensive line does. It doesn't let you sack their quarterback. And then the running backs, they went and brought a bunch of transfers in from Nebraska and Virginia and New Mexico. And they've all contributed in some ways, but Cam Davis is now becoming a star for Washington. He's right up there with Nix with touchdowns scored, and he's been returning kickoffs. He's the fastest Husky running back, and that guy's ready for a breakout anytime now. So yeah, the tight ends are good. So the offense is really solid. There's no weaknesses at all. But then when we'll talk defense, that changes totally. So
yeah, and I think as a college football fan, it's whether you like Washington or not, it's cool to watch Penix kind of find himself again and be able to stay healthy, be able to stay on the field after battling some tough injury luck at Indiana. And it's interesting to see that reuniting with Kalen DeBoer. We've seen it throughout college football. We see it in Eugene with Bo Nix reuniting with Kenny Dillingham. So it's another aspect of the kind of marriage between the transfer portal and the coaching carousel. But I like watching Penix. It's fun to watch a lefty. I think he's really a playmaker as far as maybe some similarities with Bo Nix. I think Nix is probably a little bit better with his legs, I would say, especially if you just look at the stats from this year. But Kalen DeBoer's obviously very comfortable with Penix running that offense, and he's asking him to throw the ball a whole heck of a lot. Kind of feels like an air raid style of offense out there on Mont Lake. And he's got some talented weapons to distribute the ball to. Since we're talking about the Washington offense, it only makes sense to talk a little bit about the Oregon defense and kind of where they're at. I think this is an intriguing matchup because of how well Washington is throwing the ball and, frankly, how much Oregon has kind of struggled to defend the pass this year, whether that's getting pressure on the quarterback or having some lapses in coverage. There were some explosive plays against Cal a couple weeks ago over the top. We had that 80-yard touchdown against Colorado where Christian Gonzalez and Steve Stevens had a lapse in communication. So this is going to be a really solid test for an Oregon secondary that has had some highs and lows throughout the season. They're going to be without Jamal Hill after he got ejected for targeting. on a bogus call against Colorado. So they have some pieces that are going to have to step up, like Brian Addison, Bennett Williams, Steve Stevens, that we've seen throughout the year. And I think DJ Johnson looks like he's probably going to be able to give it a go. I think he's back on the practice field after missing last week against Colorado. He's a key edge rusher for them. And then Sam Taki Taimani was not available, I think, the last 2 weeks. He's a former Husky, and word is he was wearing his Washington football shirt under his pads this week to fire the guys up a little bit more. So I'm excited to see this kind of battle between the defense and the offense, because Oregon's excelled at stopping the run, and I think that the Huskies are going to need to run the ball a little bit if Oregon's able to show up on defense. Let me rephrase that. I think that if Oregon can make the Huskies one-dimensional and force them to run maybe more than they want to, I think that could go a long way in slowing them down.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody could do that to Washington. I haven't seen it yet, and I've seen them play some pretty good defenses. The one thing that struck me is the 2 California games for Oregon and Washington. That quarterback for the Bears is pretty average at best, and he had success against both those secondaries, and that kind of stunned me a little bit. Watching Washington's secondary has been totally decimated this season with injuries, but I saw that Plummer did the same thing to Oregon, just kind of riddling him down the field in the opening drives, and he did that to Washington too. And so those are the 2 weaknesses on these 2 football teams is stopping the pass.
Yeah, and that kind of goes along with what I was saying earlier about how the defense isn't what I think a lot of Husky fans have become accustomed to. But there comes with the trade-off. You want to get the best of both worlds and ideally have a strong defense and offense, which I think is what makes it interesting that this Oregon team with a bunch of heavy hitters on the defensive side of the ball, whether you're talking about Dan Lanning, Tosh Lapoy, Noah Sewell, Justin Flo, DJ Johnson. I think it's just been interesting that the defense has been a little bit underwhelming this year. Not to say they've been terrible, but I think they've definitely underachieved as far as in comparison to where a lot of fans thought this unit was going to be heading into the year. Any other kind of points you want to hit on, Dan, when it comes to this Washington offense and what fans might be able to expect come Saturday?
Well, they're really, really creative. I mean, you can't scout them very well because DeBoer is an offensive genius. He's got his Fresno State offensive coordinator who's making a name for himself, Ryan Grubb. And if you look at their coaching roster, 5 of their offensive coaches have been offensive coordinators somewhere on the college level. So there's a lot of input, when they sit in meetings and they plot things and they do stuff I haven't seen in a long time in Husky Stadium, which is, tended to be Peterson conservative, Lake conservative, run the damn ball, Jimmy Lake said, and there wasn't a lot of surprise to that. And the offensive coordinator last year, John Donovan, who got fired the day after this football game, is now a quality coach for the Green Bay Packers on the defense. Nobody even wanted him on the offensive side. So this is how it's elevated as far as just brain trust, creativity. And that's what DeBoer's calling card is he's going to keep you guessing and he's going to keep you on your heels. Whether, he beats you or not, he's going to make it interesting. He's going to make you nervous. So, they do a lot of reverses and, little flip plays and then they want to hit you deep, right, when you're not thinking about it. And so I would expect them to pull out everything they've got this weekend because this is, this is a bigger game than whatever bowl they're going to play in at the end of the year. And this is a bigger game than the Apple Cup. And so this would rubber stamp his program if he got a victory. So, there's not any pressure on him. So he's just going to come in there freewheeling. And he played, his Fresno State team played last year at Autzen. So he knows what the environment's like. It's not new to him. A lot of his players don't know. I don't think the Huskies have been down there in 4 years since 2018. So, Jackson Kirkland was a starter in that game, but go down the roster, you might find just a handful of other guys that got into that game and just a handful that maybe even, stood on the sidelines and watched all the Duck fans yell at him. So, I'd say it's interesting and, but we never know. We never know what's going to happen, and that's what makes it so fun heading into this game. So.
I like the note that you had there, Dan, on the familiarity that's there, because this is an overhauled coaching staff for the most part, and Fresno State gave Oregon, kind of everything they could handle, especially when Jake Haener was at the helm last year. I feel like every time I turned on the TV and I saw Jake Haener playing, it was him trying to gut out some last second victory. I mean, that UCLA game was phenomenal. That dude could not stay upright. He was just getting clobbered every play, but loved watching that guy play. And you talked about the offensive experience on that staff. I think that having former coordinators is super valuable. We see something similar at Alabama with Nick Saban bringing in all these former head coaches. But I think if you can't do that, bringing in some guys that are former coordinators to focus on one position group or one aspect of the offense, whether that be the pass or the run, I think that really goes a long way in helping you kind of elevate the floor, raise the floor of your offense. And I'm excited to see some of that creativity too, because it's going to be a test for Oregon and how they're able to stay disciplined, make those open field tackles, get off the field on third down. I think this is a game that could have some pivotal momentum swings with how high-powered this Husky offense is, and I'm ready for it.
You talked about getting off the field on third down. Well, Washington likes to throw a lot on fourth down, and even in their side of the field. So that's what's made it kind of entertaining. They're not reckless. I mean, they had one that blew up on them, I think, at Arizona State. They went for it on like the 35 on the first series of the second half and gave up the ball. But who cares? I mean, it's fun to watch, and it keeps things interesting.
We're going to go ahead and take a quick break for those of you that are listening to us on the podcasting platform. And we'll have more Oregon versus Washington preview for you right after this. Welcome back to the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, talking with Dan Raley of Inside the Huskies ahead of this weekend's top 25 rivalry showdown in Eugene at Autzen Stadium. It's going to be a great time. I'm going to be at the game. Dan's going to be at the game. And we hope a lot of you guys are going to be at the game. So, Dan, we just talked about the Washington offense, which is really, I don't know if I'd say a complete 180, but they're firing on all cylinders. One of the best units in the country, especially passing the ball. But like you were saying at the top of the show, it's a little bit of a different story on that defensive side of the ball in this season. So kind of walk us through what the story's been with this Huskies defense, if you could, and maybe some names to know.
Yeah, well, a good example of, last year the Ducks came in and ran all over the Husky defense. There are only 3 starters back from that game. And one of them might not even start. Zion Tupuola-Fatui got banged up twice against Oregon State. He's going to play, but he may be moved out of the starting lineup. I could see that happening. So there might be just 2 guys that were on the field last year that started that'll be on the field this year. And then the other thing too is Eddie Ulofosio's back, and he might be he's one of the best linebackers in the Pac-12. I mean, he's been graded out that way. He was all second team all Pac-12 2 years ago, and he missed 14 games because he got injured twice. Once with before this Oregon game last year, so he didn't play in it. And then when winter workouts, he blew a knee, but he came back and played 7 plays against Oregon State, and they've been trying to get him ready for this Oregon game, and he could be in the starting lineup and could play and make a whole bunch of difference in their defense, because they haven't had many playmakers. They only have 9 turnovers in 9 games, 6 interceptions and 3 fumble recoveries, and so Ulofosio is a playmaker, but the defense has been a mess, and it's DeBoer didn't inherit a lot of playmakers, and he inherited a Ulofosio, but he was injured. He just got him for the first time here last week. So you look at the secondary, there were 5 starters back there. 4 of them went out and missed a whole bunch of games. And they finally got them back for the first time last week against Oregon State, all 5 original starters, but 4 of them were gone. Both cornerbacks, which is really dangerous. They were playing redshirt freshmen at cornerback for a good part of the middle of the season. So all those guys are back too. But when they're all back, there's still, I'm not sure the talent level that's there. The front line is average. The edge rushers are really good. Ulofosio will give the linebackers a boost, but they're kind of average. If you remember Carson Brunner intercepting one and going 50 yards against Oregon last year and having a pretty good football game while the rest of the defense suffered, he doesn't even start right now. they put him on the second unit all season long, and he's still a good player, but I think they're trying to speed up the defense a little bit. And he's probably not as fast as they want. So you've seen it. Of those 11 starters this year, only 5 have started every game. So there's been a lot of disruption, a lot of inconsistency, a lack of talent base. That's where DeBoer needs to recruit and bulk his program up, is on the defensive side. So they come in a little shaky still, with what they have to offer against the Ducks.
I think a lot of Oregon fans, they hear about the secondary, which has for so long been a strength of Washington, whether it's Taylor Rapp, Bookie Radley Hiles, Trent McDuffie. There's just a lot of names that have been coming out of Washington in terms of DBs. And I think for Oregon, this is probably the most confident they've felt about their wide receivers and their passing attack in quite some time. One of the big stories to monitor is Chase Cota going to be available to go in this one. He is a very valuable piece of this Oregon offense, the number 2 wideout behind Troy Franklin. But in his absence, the Ducks have gotten some other guys involved. Chris Hudson's really come on strong this year. He's finding a good role. And who else do they have at wideout? Hudson is definitely one of the main guys, but Dante Thornton's gotten some more run this year in Coda's absence, and they've gotten the tight ends involved quite a bit too. I think that whatever team you are, tight ends are just a super versatile position to defend and to kind of, they have those formations that they like to bring in, the 14J formation where they get all the tight ends in there. You got Ferguson, Matavao. Matavao was heavily recruited by Washington coming out of high school. Patrick Herbert, Cam McCormick. There's just so many different ways this Oregon offense can kind of tear you apart. And I think the vertical passing attack is absolutely going to be a factor in this one, an aspect of the offense that was completely missing last year under Mario Cristobal and Joe Moorhead. So I think that's going to be an area where both of these teams look to expose each other and try to take some shots. But you talked about the edge rushers. I really like Braylon Trice, seeing what he's been doing for them this year. I think Oregon's offensive line is one of, if not the best units in the country in that regard. And I think that they're going to be ready for whatever that Washington front has to throw at them.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Watching this defense just doesn't put a lot of, I don't know if the word is confidence, but I expect them to break down, because that's been the way the way it's been all season long. I mean, with the exception of one game, Portland State, which, FCS team, but everybody else has been able to exploit them and hit them deep and hit them long and run up a bunch of points. The Michigan State game and the Stanford game were really, really one-sided, and then they ended up as 10-point games, 11-point games in the end. Arizona as well. So yeah, they're just it's inviting for an offensive coordinator to see what they can do to attack this Washington defense.
You'd be hard pressed to find an offensive coordinator that's having a better season in college football than Kenny Dillingham. Every week, I'm just surprised by how well the offense played. You had a couple slow starts in the past couple of games against Cal and Colorado that I think are a little bit surprising. But if this Oregon offense can start fast, I think it can go a long way, and the defense can get some stops, then maybe this game gets out of hand quickly. But if the Oregon defense can't get off the field, if they can't slow down Michael Penix in that offense, I think we could be seeing something more along the lines of a shootout. But Oregon's offense is, I think, the only team in the country that has rattled off 40 or more points in 8 games this year. Bo Nix is, having a phenomenal year. I'm kind of curious to get some of your thoughts here, Dan, just about, do you think, looking on the outside, that Bo Nix really, has a shot at the Heisman, or it seems like he certainly deserves a seat at the table at this point in the season?
Well, he deserves it, consideration. But the problem with the Heisman vote, and I used to be a Heisman voter, it's heavily stacked on the East, and just like the AP poll. I mean, you look at it, and I'm surprised there's 5 Pac-12 teams in the AP poll. But, it makes it almost impossible for Pac-12 guys and teams to get accolades unless they just do it out in the field and win a national championship. And that hasn't happened in decades in this conference. And so, Yeah, he deserves a chance, but he had a better chance at Auburn than he does at Oregon, strictly because of how it's politically stacked and it's just regionally stacked. I mean, and it's most of the population is back east, and most of the college football base is back east, so it's a natural thing, and it's just something that the Pac-12 has to live with. You're not going to be on ESPN or CBS at 1:30 on Saturday. You're going to be, if you're in the Pac-12, you're going to be playing at 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock at night on ESPN and Fox. So those are the cold hard facts of college football right now.
Yeah, and I think I agree with a lot of the points that you have there. I think he deserves to be in the consideration or in the conversation, but whether or not it's actually going to happen, we'll have to see. I think another part of that is going to be, dependent on what Oregon is able to do these next 3, possibly 4 games. If they're able to run the table, get to the Pac-12 title game, you don't want to get too ahead of yourselves, but that'll certainly, get more eyes on the team, and I think it'll help his Heisman resume because of having quality wins over what could be 3 ranked opponents, 4 ranked opponents if they make it to Las Vegas. But with this Washington defense, I think, like you've been saying, it hasn't been the group that fans have been used to. I'm looking at the schedule right now. 39 points allowed to Arizona and 45 points allowed to Arizona State, 2 of the lower tier teams in the conference. What do you think is going to be the biggest key for Washington if they want to try to slow down this Oregon offense?
Well, the biggest key will be how ready is Edifwan Ulofoshio ready to play. I mean, how much can he offer? Because he's the playmaker they've lacked. He's the guy that could, run into Bo Nix and cause a fumble. He's the guy who could intercept one in the flat. That stuff just hasn't happened. And so there's a lot of pressure on him to maybe change things around. And, he's only played partially in 1 game, so I don't know what he's really got physically, but he is a good football player. He'll be like, Mike Singletary or who else was the other example? He's going to be a good NFL football player when it's time for him. And he's just, he's probably the best football player on the Husky roster, overall, most talented guy. He'll be the highest draft pick when he's ready. So it's kind of up to him to see if he can fix the defense a little bit, and if they can find some schemes that fool the Ducks. I don't know if that's possible, but you won't see any redshirt freshmen or true freshman cornerbacks out there. And there's been 3 or even 4 of them that have been in the secondary, playing a lot of minutes and getting lit up. So they've got the veterans back. So it won't be so easy. But see, the veterans, there's no all Pac-12 players in the secondary. Like there were 2 last year, and Kyler Gordon and Trent McDuffie, but none of those guys are more than just an average, Pac-12 football player right now. So it's their weakness, and we'll see how much the Ducks exploit it.
Okay, yeah, I'm interested to learn a little bit more about Ulofoshio. Seeing that I see on his bio he's from Anchorage, so that's kind of cool. But he played high school ball at Bishop Gorman, which we know is a D1 factory for college football players out there in Las Vegas. What was I gonna say? Yeah, I think. Oh shoot, total brain fart. But I'm excited to see what the defense looks like, and if Oregon can come out and deliver that opening punch, because both of these teams are kind of weaker on defense. That was the point. I'm surprised that ZTF isn't the most talented guy on this defense, but you play the season to see which guys can stick and which ones can emerge. So
well, he's been one of the surprise developments with the board staff. Like Jimmy Lake would have made ZTF a focal guy, pulling all the snaps, and he was in the pandemic shortened season. He had a phenomenal 3-game stretch of 7 sacks, 3 strip sacks, got some lower All-American honors, was first team All Pac-12. But what you didn't see or you didn't acknowledge during that season is they ran on the Huskies that year as well. And so he's not very good against the run, but he's a fantastic edge rusher on passing downs. So DeBoer's staff comes in and makes him a sub. I mean, he started 2 out of the 9 games so far behind Braylon Trice. Braylon Trice is more of your all-around edge rusher with power and speed to stop the run stop the pass. But ZTF probably play in the NFL, but he's going to be a specialist, a dimensional, one-dimensional player, maybe third down guy going after the quarterback. But, if you got somebody coming around the corner, you probably want Trice in there, not ZTF. So that's been kind of revealing with the board staff is how they graded him and made him kind of, not a showcase player anymore. And it's kind of up for him to get it back. I mean, I don't know if his strength levels are going to impress anybody when he goes to the combine. So, he's a big guy. He's a funny guy. He's got a lot of skill, a lot of speed, but not the complete package, that maybe Braylon Trice is. And then the other guy that Washington has up front, Jeremiah Martin, who's at Texas A&M for 3 years, he's strictly a power guy. And he runs over guys, and so he owns the other edge rushing spot. So ZTF is the third edge rusher on this football team, which is kind of incredible if you think about where he's been. So,
well, that's why we bring you on to share your insight. That's a cool development to learn more about and track here. Kind of want to start winding down a little bit, get some of our final thoughts out there. But there was actually a question from one of the viewers for you, Dan, that we could run by you. Cascadia Surfrider says, Dan, what is this news with the Husky fan base in regards to wanting to stay in the pack or wanting to go to the Big Ten? Thanks. What do we think here?
Well, I think the general idea is, do you want to be USC and UCLA and go to the Big 12 where it's going to, the Big 10, it's the Big 14 actually, but do you want to go there and travel like crazy and run yourself into the ground with budgets and just your physical fitness for all your athletic programs and be maybe a middle of the pack team, because you're not going to go in there and take over for Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State, and in a good year, Wisconsin and Michigan State. So so it's prestigious, so it's all this money. But do you want to be a perennially, middle of the pack team, or do you want to stay in the Pac-12 where you have all these natural rivalries, where you have everything set up in a regional basis, where you and Oregon, if Oregon stays, are the big dogs in the conference as far as just reputation, whether you're any good at football. So, I think everybody in Seattle wants to be kind of the big dog instead of, this thing where, we're going to have 70 million, payouts for each football team, and that's going to make us be able to compete with Alabama and Georgia. No, it's not. You're going to get beat to a pulp by trying to do this. And I think maybe USC will be like Notre Dame, where they can fit in anywhere. But I think UCLA is going to regret this like crazy, that they did this and left the nice comfort of being a big dog in the Pac-12 and playing in LA, because, they're just going to be in LA part of the time once they leave. So no, Washington doesn't want to go. If they get forced into it, if there's a super realignment and everybody flips, and goes places, then maybe you'll see a West Division in a conference, like the Big Ten, where there's 4 or 5 or 6 of these teams and they can stay home a lot and play. But I don't know. I don't know what's coming. I don't know how they're going to narrow this down to 70, 80 teams and say, have at it, and here's all this money for all you 70, 80 teams. You don't have to play Montana or Portland State anymore and share your proceeds, and you got to play real football games every Saturday. I think that's what Washington wants, and we'll see how they play it out.
All right. Well, interesting to get your insight there, and the fan base insight as well, because with regard to realignment and the Big Ten and Oregon's chances of going there, it really feels like Oregon and Washington are kind of tied at the hip at this point. And I tend to side with you a little bit more as far as USC and UCLA's, output or projection in the Big Ten. Right now, at least, I don't see either of them stacking up too well against Ohio State or Michigan. I think I would give USC the benefit of the doubt because Lincoln Riley knows how to recruit and he knows how to win in today's college football, versus Chip Kelly knows how to win, but we haven't really seen, at least recently, him sustaining at a high level. And we know that he doesn't really enjoy recruiting. And if you want to be successful, you've got to be about recruiting in today's era of college football, in my opinion. So I like to see what's up there with Washington and the Big Ten. And we always love getting your guys' questions, so make sure you keep sending them in. I want to kind of wind down with kind of some of our final thoughts here, Dan. Maybe I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, and we can roll out a prediction. While you boil on that, I'm I'm going to give my prediction. I think right now for this game, I don't see Washington as a team that I don't think Washington's going to be the first team to keep Oregon under 40. I think Oregon's going to be able to put up a lot of points here. The question is going to be, does the defense show up? Can they slow down Michael Penix and Roma Dunze and those wide receivers? And can they stop the run, which they have proven they can do, but can they get after Penix? There's a lot of questions there. What does Jamal Hill's absence in the first half mean for the outcome of this game? I think that Oregon's going to come away with a win. I'm going to go in the neighborhood of 45, 49 points for Oregon and about 28 for Washington. So I think if Oregon's defense can show up and make some plays, which I think they can, I think they can win this one pretty handedly. But I think Washington's going to put up some points as well, just not as much as Oregon, to put it simply.
Well, what I think is, and the Oregon-Georgia game was a perfect example of this. Oregon's got a lot of talent, and they've shown it. And they've settled down, and they've won games, and they've hit on all cylinders. But they went into Georgia and freaked out, and that's the side of the game that, you never anticipate. And that's what I'm not sure that DeBoer fully gets yet, or even the rest of this football team, is what it's going to be like at Autzen Stadium on Saturday. They're a good football team, and they're going to come in and do some good things, but I don't think they have a full feel for the environment that awaits them. And this thing is a notch up. I mean, this is going to be a notch up than Oregon hosting UCLA. They don't hate UCLA. They just want to beat them. They hate Washington. They want to beat them. They want to do it big. So I tried to impress on DeBoer. Do you understand the emotions behind this one? And that score I gave you, 58-0 one year for Oregon, 66-0 for Washington the next year. It's just, that's a perfect example of this. Everything is ratcheted up. So none of these Huskies have been in Eugene for 4 years. And DeBoer has been there, but he came in with Fresno State, which, was treated politely and left and did their thing. They lost. But I just see that Washington might be a deer in the headlights in this one, even though DeBoer gets them prepared, but I don't think they have enough firepower, especially on defense, to come in and step it up. And so it'll kind of depend on what happens on the first series or two of this game, the tenor, whether it'll be a competitive game or a blowout. And I can see anything happening. And so I would be conservative and try to be respectful to all sides involved and say maybe Oregon wins 42-28. But if Washington won, it wouldn't surprise me. Well, it would surprise me, but that I think they're more capable of doing that this year than they were last year and maybe the year before. So just with their offense. So 42-28 is my prediction, and I'll take any criticism anybody wants.
No, I think that's a reasonable one, especially with some of the question marks that you see from both of these teams. I think that's right around where the spread's at. The last I checked, 12.5, 13, either way. We're seeing some more folks here in the show throwing their predictions in the live chat. So always love to see you guys getting involved. But yeah, okay. So we both think that Oregon's going to come away with the win here in this rivalry matchup. We're both going to be making our way out to Eugene. I fly out of Burbank at 7 a.m. tomorrow. So I got a nice little drive for myself in the morning. Probably going to leave around 4:30, maybe probably around 4:30. But I cannot wait to be back in Eugene. It's going to be awesome. Be back in Autzen and soaking up those vibes. But any final thoughts here, Dan, before we get out of here?
No, I just, these two programs mirror each other. I mean, Washington with the Don James era won like 15 out of 18 games, and the fan base got really full of itself and started to gloat and just rub it in because they had the upper hand. And, Oregon's done that now, won 15 out of 17 games. And I see the fan base almost exactly like that Husky fan base, just, feeling the sense of power and the sense of superiority and all of this, but it never lasts forever. And I just say, try and check it a little bit, because I've seen the Washington thing blow up, and Oregon's got a lot going for it, but just try and keep it sane a little bit, and it's just a football game.
All right. All right, there you go. Well, I think it's going to be a fun game for sure. Supposed to be a colder game. Kickoff is set for 4:10 on Fox. If you guys can't make it out to Eugene, but I'm sure that a lot of fans are going to be there. I would be surprised if this isn't a sellout game. Dan Lanning's first taste of the Washington-Oregon rivalry. Tons of overlap between the two schools. We've talked about Taki. Got Junior Adams coming over from Washington last year, and the wide receivers have been a phenomenal group so far this year. So plenty to keep our eye on in this game. Quick reminder for you guys watching or listening, we'll be back for a second episode of the Ducks Dish podcast later today. I'm going to be going on Fox Sports Eugene to record my weekly radio hit, and we will be talking about a bunch of the big names that Dan Lanning and the Ducks are bringing in on the recruiting trail, trying to close out very strong in this 23 class with early signing day just about a month away. So you guys know I love to talk recruiting. Just want to make sure you were aware of that. Before we get out of here, Dan, where can people find more of you if they want to learn more about the Huskies and kind of your work in the college football space?
Yeah, it's just pretty basic. SI.com/college/Washington. Or if you just want to Google my name and Sports Illustrated, you'll find it too. So.
All right, simple enough. Make sure you guys tap in with Dan and check out all the great work that he has going on over there. Inside the Huskies is the name of his site. If you want to find more of me, you can, of course, do that. Follow me on Twitter at @mtorresports. That is the fastest, quickest, easiest way to get all my Oregon football, Oregon recruiting updates. You can always find me on YouTube, youtube.com/Oregon Football Max Torres. If you guys are here in the live chat, go ahead and hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. It's a tremendous help. And then you can find all my written content, especially recruiting, covering the Ducks. DucksDigest.com is where I'm at over there. And then last but not least, support the show, please. It is a great help for us. The best way to do that is to share the Ducks Dish podcast with your friends, with your family, with other Duck fans. You know the rules. But that'll do it for us on this episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Really big thank you to Dan. Tons of fun having you on the show to preview Oregon against Washington. And I hope I'll see you on Saturday at some point. But that'll do it for us here. Until next time, you've been listening to the Ducks Dish podcast.